Question 1. Risk assessment procedures indicate that a public relations campaign for new financial services client involves the use of sensitive, non-public client data for targeted outreach. The project timeline is aggressive, and the PR manager is concerned about potential data privacy breaches and unauthorized disclosure of information during rapid communication development. Which of the following approaches best ensures regulatory compliance and ethical leadership while managing the project effectively? Option A. Implement a rigorous, multi-stage internal review and approval process for all external communications, ensuring all team members receive updated training on data privacy protocols and client confidentiality agreements before campaign launch. Option B. Proceed with the campaign as planned, relying on the team's general understanding of data privacy and assuming that junior team members will flag any significant concerns. Option C. Delegate the responsibility for ensuring data privacy and communication accuracy entirely to the most experienced team member, trusting their judgment without establishing formal oversight. Option D. Halt the campaign immediately until a comprehensive, external legal review of all campaign materials and data handling procedures can be completed, even if this significantly delays the launch. Correct answer is A. Implement a rigorous, multi-stage internal review and approval process for all external communications, ensuring all team members receive updated training on data privacy protocols and client confidentiality agreements before campaign launch. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge due to the inherent tension between achieving project objectives and adhering to regulatory compliance, particularly concerning data privacy and communication protocols. A public relations manager must balance the need for timely and effective campaign execution with the imperative to protect sensitive client information and ensure all public communications are accurate and authorized. The specific jurisdiction for this exam is the United States, and therefore, all regulatory and ethical considerations must align with U.S. federal laws and professional PR codes of conduct. The correct approach involves a proactive and collaborative risk mitigation strategy that prioritizes regulatory adherence and ethical communication. This entails establishing clear internal protocols for data handling and communication approval, ensuring all team members are trained on these procedures, and implementing a robust review process before any external communication is disseminated. This aligns with the Public Relations Society of America, PRSA, Code of Ethics, which emphasizes accuracy, truthfulness, and avoiding conflicts of interest, as well as the principles of responsible data stewardship, implicitly supported by regulations like the California Consumer Privacy Act, CCPA, and the general principles of data protection under U.S. law, even without a single overarching federal privacy law. The manager's responsibility is to ensure that project execution does not inadvertently lead to breaches of confidentiality or misrepresentation. An incorrect approach would be to proceed with the campaign without a formal review process for external communications, especially when sensitive client data is involved. This risks violating client confidentiality agreements and potentially misrepresenting information to the public, which is a direct contravention of ethical PR practice and could lead to reputational damage for both the agency and the client. Furthermore, it bypasses necessary checks that could prevent the disclosure of non-public information, which could have legal ramifications depending on the nature of the data and the client's industry. Another incorrect approach is to delay the campaign indefinitely due to fear of potential breaches, without implementing any mitigation strategies. While caution is warranted, an inability to manage risks and execute campaigns effectively demonstrates a failure in leadership and project management. This can lead to missed opportunities and client dissatisfaction, undermining the core function of a public relations manager. It suggests a lack of confidence in the team's ability to operate within established guidelines and a failure to develop robust processes. Finally, an incorrect approach would be to delegate the responsibility for ensuring regulatory compliance solely to junior team members, without providing adequate training, oversight, or clear guidelines. This abdicates the manager's leadership responsibility and creates a high risk of unintentional noncompliance. The manager is ultimately accountable for the team's adherence to ethical and legal standards. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve 1. Identifying potential risks, including regulatory and ethical ones, early in the project lifecycle. 2. Developing clear, documented policies and procedures for data handling, communication approval, and crisis management. 3. Providing comprehensive training to the team on these policies and relevant regulations. 4. Implementing a multi-stage review and approval process for all external communications. 5. Fostering a culture of open communication where team members feel empowered to raise concerns about potential compliance issues without fear of reprisal. 6. Regularly reviewing and updating policies and training to reflect changes in regulations and best practices. Question 2. During the evaluation of a new public relations campaign for a pharmaceutical company launching a novel treatment, the public relations manager is tasked with setting strategic objectives. The marketing department is pushing for objectives that emphasize rapid market penetration and widespread public awareness, suggesting a focus on securing prominent media coverage and highlighting potential patient testimonials. Even if the long-term efficacy data is still emerging, the public relations manager is concerned that these objectives might be overly ambitious and could lead to the dissemination of information that is not yet fully substantiated, potentially creating unrealistic expectations among patients and healthcare providers. Which approach to setting strategic objectives is most aligned with regulatory requirements and ethical public relations practice? Option A. Set easily achievable objectives focused on internal stakeholder satisfaction with the campaign's visibility, regardless of the actual impact on public perception or understanding of the treatment. Option B. Prioritize securing high-profile media placements and generating significant buzz, even if it means emphasizing preliminary positive outcomes and downplaying uncertainties in the initial communication strategy. Option C. Base objectives on anecdotal patient success stories and projections from the marketing team, aiming for widespread public awareness without a strong emphasis on rigorous scientific validation in the initial communication. Option D. Develop smart objectives that focus on communicating accurate, balanced information about the treatment's current known benefits and risks based on available scientific data, and aim for measured increases in informed public and professional understanding within a defined time frame. The correct answer is D. Develop smart objectives that focus on communicating accurate, balanced information about the treatment's current known benefits and risks based on available scientific data, and aim for measured increases in informed public and professional understanding within a defined time frame. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge due to the inherent conflict between achieving a desired outcome for the organization and adhering to ethical communication principles and regulatory requirements. The public relations manager must navigate the pressure to present a positive image while ensuring that the strategic plan's objectives are realistic, measurable, and ethically sound, avoiding misleading or unsubstantiated claims. Careful judgment is required to balance stakeholder interests, organizational goals, and the integrity of public communication. The correct approach involves developing objectives that are specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time-bound, SMART, and that are grounded in a thorough understanding of the current situation and realistic projections. This approach ensures that the strategic plan is not only ambitious, but also actionable and defensible. Regulatory and ethical justification stems from the principle of transparency and honesty in public relations. For instance, under general ethical codes for public relations professionals, which often mirror regulatory intent, misleading the public or making unsubstantiated claims is a violation. A SMART objective, by its nature, provides a clear benchmark for success and avoids vague promises that could be interpreted as deceptive. This aligns with the expectation that public relations activities should be truthful and accurate. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on achieving a high-profile media placement without considering the substance of the message or the potential for misinterpretation fails to meet ethical and regulatory standards. This could lead to the dissemination of information that is not fully substantiated or that creates unrealistic expectations, potentially violating regulations against false or misleading advertising or communication. Another incorrect approach that prioritizes internal stakeholder satisfaction over objective reality by setting easily achievable but ultimately meaningless goals undermines the credibility of the public relations function and can lead to a misallocation of resources. This also risks violating ethical principles of accountability and responsible advocacy. A third incorrect approach that relies on anecdotal evidence or speculation rather than data-driven insights to set objectives is inherently flawed. This can result in strategies that are ineffective and, if communicated publicly, could be seen as irresponsible or even deceptive, as they lack a solid foundation. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that begins with a comprehensive situational analysis, including an assessment of the organization's current standing, its resources, and the external environment. This is followed by the formulation of clear, ethical, and measurable objectives that align with the overall strategic goals. Strategies should then be developed to achieve these objectives, with a constant consideration for regulatory compliance and ethical implications. Regular evaluation and adaptation of the plan based on performance data and evolving circumstances are crucial to maintaining integrity and effectiveness. Question 3. System analysis indicates that a public relations manager is tasked with presenting the return on investment (ROI) of the company's social media strategy to the board of directors. The board has expressed skepticism about the tangible business value derived from social media activities, demanding clear evidence of financial impact. Which of the following approaches best addresses this demand by demonstrating measurable ROI in a manner consistent with professional PR standards and ethical reporting? Option A. Presenting a comprehensive analysis of website traffic originating from social media, conversion rates of social media-driven leads, and the cost-effectiveness of acquiring customers through social channels, directly linking these to sales figures and revenue generated. Option B. Providing a detailed report on competitor social media activity and benchmarking the company's engagement rates against industry averages to demonstrate competitive parity. Option C. Sharing a collection of positive customer testimonials and anecdotal success stories gathered from social media interactions, emphasizing the qualitative impact on brand perception. Option D. Showcasing a significant increase in follower counts across all social media platforms and highlighting positive sentiment from user comments and shares as evidence of successful engagement. The correct answer is A. Presenting a comprehensive analysis of website traffic originating from social media, conversion rates of social media-driven leads, and the cost-effectiveness of acquiring customers through social channels, directly linking these to sales figures and revenue generated. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires a public relations manager to demonstrate the tangible value of their social media efforts to a skeptical board of directors. The challenge lies in translating qualitative social media engagement into quantifiable business outcomes, a common hurdle in PR where direct attribution can be complex. The board's demand for ROI necessitates a strategic approach that moves beyond vanity metrics to demonstrate genuine impact on business objectives. Careful judgment is required to select metrics that are both relevant to the company's goals and defensible to a financially minded audience. The correct approach involves aligning social media monitoring and analytics with specific, measurable business objectives, and then tracking key performance indicators, KPI, that directly correlate with those objectives. This demonstrates a strategic understanding of how PR contributes to the bottom line. For instance, if a business objective is to increase lead generation, then tracking metrics like website traffic originating from social media, conversion rates of social media leads, and the cost per lead generated through social channels would be appropriate. This approach is ethically sound as it promotes transparency and accountability in reporting. It also aligns with professional best practices in public relations, which emphasize data-driven decision-making and the ability to articulate the value of PR activities to stakeholders. While specific regulations for PR certification in the UK/CCI context might not dictate precise social media metrics, the overarching ethical codes and professional standards emphasize honesty, accuracy, and demonstrating value, which this approach upholds. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on engagement metrics like likes, shares, and follower growth fails to demonstrate ROI. While these metrics indicate reach and audience interaction, they do not directly translate to business impact such as sales, customer acquisition, or brand reputation enhancement in a way that satisfies a board's financial scrutiny. This approach is professionally deficient because it misrepresents the effectiveness of PR efforts by presenting superficial data. Ethically, it can be seen as misleading stakeholders by focusing on easily achievable but ultimately less meaningful metrics. Another incorrect approach that relies on anecdotal evidence or qualitative testimonials without quantitative backing is also professionally unsound. While testimonials can be valuable, they are subjective and difficult to scale or attribute directly to specific social media campaigns. Presenting such information as primary evidence of ROI to a board seeking concrete financial justification would be seen as unprofessional and lacking in rigor. This approach fails to meet the professional standard of providing objective, data-supported insights. A third incorrect approach that involves comparing social media performance to competitors without linking it to internal business objectives is also flawed. While competitive analysis is a useful tool, it does not in itself demonstrate ROI for the organization. The focus must remain on how social media efforts contribute to the company's own goals, not just how they stack up against others. This approach misses the core requirement of demonstrating value to the organization's specific business outcomes. A professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a clear understanding of the organization's strategic objectives. The PR manager must then identify how social media can contribute to achieving these objectives. Subsequently, they should select relevant, measurable KPIs that track progress towards these objectives. Finally, they must be able to interpret this data and present it in a clear, concise, and compelling manner that demonstrates the tangible value of PR activities to stakeholders, particularly those focused on financial performance. This involves a continuous cycle of planning, execution, monitoring, analysis, and reporting, all aligned with business goals. Question 4. Performance analysis shows that our current methods for identifying target audiences for new investment products are yielding suboptimal engagement and potential regulatory scrutiny. We are launching a new, complex structured product with a moderate risk profile, which approach to audience segmentation and profiling is most likely to ensure effective communication while strictly adhering to the regulatory framework for financial promotions and investor protection. Option A. Employing a broad-stroke marketing campaign that casts a wide net, aiming for maximum reach with a standardized message, and relying on general disclaimers to cover all potential recipients. Option B. Developing detailed audience personas that incorporate demographic data, psychographic profiles e.g., risk tolerance, financial goals, and behavioral patterns, cross-referenced with regulatory definitions of retail and sophisticated investors to tailor messaging and disclosure. Option C. Segmenting audiences based on broad age ranges and general income brackets, assuming all individuals within these groups have similar investment knowledge and risk appetites. Option D. Focusing primarily on past investment performance data of potential clients, assuming their future behavior will mirror their historical choices, regardless of the new product's specific characteristics or current market conditions. The correct answer is C. Segmenting audiences based on broad age ranges and general income brackets, assuming all individuals within these groups have similar investment knowledge and risk appetites. Explanation: this scenario is professionally challenging because it requires a public relations manager to balance the need for effective communication with strict adherence to regulatory frameworks governing financial promotions and client interaction. The core challenge lies in accurately identifying and segmenting target audiences for a new investment product, ensuring that the communication strategy is both persuasive and compliant. Misidentification or oversimplification of audiences can lead to regulatory breaches, reputational damage, and ineffective campaign outcomes. Careful judgment is required to navigate the nuances of investor profiles and the specific disclosure requirements mandated by the regulatory body. The correct approach involves a multifaceted segmentation strategy that moves beyond basic demographics to incorporate psychographic and behavioral factors, alongside a thorough understanding of regulatory definitions of sophisticated investors and retail clients. This approach ensures that communications are tailored to the appropriate audience, with the necessary disclosures and risk warnings being delivered to those most likely to be impacted. This aligns with the regulatory framework's emphasis on fair treatment of customers and the prevention of misleading financial promotions. Specifically, it adheres to guidelines that require firms to understand their clients and ensure that communications are appropriate for their knowledge, experience, and financial situation. An incorrect approach that relies solely on broad demographic data, e.g., age and income, fails to account for the varying levels of financial sophistication and risk tolerance within those groups. This can lead to the dissemination of complex investment information to retail investors who may not possess the necessary understanding to make informed decisions, thereby violating regulations designed to protect less experienced investors. Another incorrect approach that focuses exclusively on past investment behavior without considering current market conditions or the specific nature of the new product risks misrepresenting the product's suitability. Regulations often require that promotions be fair, clear, and not misleading, which necessitates an understanding of how the product aligns with an investor's current circumstances and risk appetite, not just historical patterns. A third incorrect approach that prioritizes speed and broad reach over precise audience definition can result in a one-size-fits-all communication strategy. This is ethically problematic, as it fails to acknowledge the diverse needs and understanding levels of potential investors, and can lead to regulatory noncompliance by omitting crucial risk warnings or suitability assessments for certain segments. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a systematic review of regulatory guidance on financial promotions and client categorization. This should be followed by a deep dive into market research to develop detailed audience personas that incorporate demographic, psychographic, and behavioral elements. Crucially, each communication piece must be vetted against these personas and the relevant regulatory requirements to ensure appropriateness and compliance before dissemination. Question 5. Operational review demonstrates that a public relations campaign aimed at increasing public understanding of a new environmental initiative is experiencing varied reception across different demographic groups. The public relations manager is considering leveraging communication theories to tailor messaging for each group. Which of the following approaches best aligns with professional best practices and regulatory expectations for public relations management? Option A. Employing persuasive techniques derived from cognitive dissonance theory to highlight the inconsistencies in public opinion and encourage adoption of the initiative's viewpoint. Option B. Utilizing principles of the two-step flow of communication to identify and engage influential individuals within each demographic to disseminate information and shape perceptions. Option C. Focusing on framing the initiative's benefits through emotionally resonant narratives, drawing on theories of emotional contagion to maximize engagement and positive sentiment, even if it means downplaying potential drawbacks. Option D. Applying audience segmentation based on psychographic profiles and then developing messages that address the specific values and concerns of each segment, ensuring factual accuracy and transparency in all communications. The correct answer is A. Employing persuasive techniques derived from cognitive dissonance theory to highlight the inconsistencies in public opinion and encourage adoption of the initiative's viewpoint. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because a public relations manager must balance the need to communicate effectively with diverse audiences with the ethical and regulatory obligations to ensure transparency and avoid misleading information. Understanding audience behavior through communication theories is crucial for tailoring messages, but this must be done within the bounds of established professional conduct and any applicable regulatory frameworks. The core difficulty lies in discerning when the application of theory crosses into manipulation or misrepresentation, which can have significant reputational and legal consequences. The correct approach involves a nuanced application of communication theories, such as the elaboration likelihood model or agenda-setting theory, to understand how different audience segments process information and what influences their perceptions. This allows for the development of targeted and resonant communication strategies that are both persuasive and truthful. Specifically, this approach prioritizes audience understanding to facilitate informed decision-making and engagement, rather than to exploit cognitive biases or spread misinformation. This aligns with the ethical imperative of public relations to foster mutual understanding and respect between organizations and their publics, and adheres to any relevant professional codes of conduct that emphasize honesty and accuracy. An incorrect approach would be to solely focus on persuasive techniques derived from communication theories, without considering the ethical implications or the potential for misinterpretation. For instance, employing a strategy that heavily relies on emotional appeals or selective framing, as suggested by certain interpretations of framing theory, without providing balanced information could be seen as manipulative. This fails to uphold the principle of providing accurate and complete information, potentially violating ethical guidelines that prohibit deceptive practices. Another incorrect approach might involve oversimplifying audience behavior based on broad theoretical assumptions, leading to messages that are either irrelevant or, worse, offensive to specific segments, thereby undermining trust and damaging the organization's reputation. This demonstrates a failure to conduct thorough audience analysis and a disregard for the diversity of public opinion and understanding. Professionals should approach such situations by first identifying the communication objectives and the target audiences. Then they should select appropriate communication theories to inform their strategy, always prioritizing ethical considerations and regulatory compliance. This involves a continuous evaluation of messages for accuracy, fairness, and potential for misinterpretation. A robust decision-making process would include seeking feedback, conducting pilot tests, and consulting with legal or compliance departments when necessary to ensure that communication strategies are both effective and responsible. Question 6. Governance review demonstrates that the company's recent environmental compliance initiative, while meeting minimum regulatory standards, has been framed by some external stakeholders as insufficient to address long-term ecological impact. As a public relations manager, what is the most ethically and regulatorily sound approach to shaping public perception of this initiative? Option A. Utilize emotionally charged language and compelling narratives about the company's dedication to the environment to overshadow the specific details of the compliance initiative and the external criticisms. Option B. Downplay the external concerns about long-term ecological impact by emphasizing the complexity of environmental science and suggesting that current scientific understanding is insufficient to definitively assess the initiative's long-term effects. Option C. Focus exclusively on the positive aspects of the initiative, emphasizing the company's commitment to environmental responsibility and highlighting the successful achievement of regulatory compliance without addressing external concerns about long-term impact. Option D. Proactively develop a communication strategy that acknowledges the initiative's scope, clearly explains how it meets current regulatory requirements, and transparently outlines the company's ongoing commitment to continuous environmental improvement and future plans beyond the minimum standards. The correct answer is D. Proactively develop a communication strategy that acknowledges the initiative's scope, clearly explains how it meets current regulatory requirements, and transparently outlines the company's ongoing commitment to continuous environmental improvement and future plans beyond the minimum standards. Explanation. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires a public relations manager to navigate the delicate balance between advocating for a company's strategic interests and upholding ethical communication standards, particularly when framing complex information. The pressure to present a favorable narrative, while also ensuring accuracy and transparency, demands careful judgment. The core of the challenge lies in applying framing theory responsibly within the regulatory and ethical boundaries of the Public Relations Manager certification exam's specified jurisdiction. The correct approach involves proactively identifying potential negative interpretations of the company's actions and developing communication strategies that address these concerns directly and transparently, using clear, factual language. This aligns with the ethical imperative to provide accurate information and avoid misleading the public, which is a cornerstone of professional public relations practice. Regulatory frameworks often emphasize truthfulness, fairness, and the avoidance of deceptive practices. By anticipating and mitigating negative framing, the PR manager demonstrates a commitment to responsible communication that builds trust and credibility, thereby adhering to the spirit and letter of professional conduct guidelines. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on highlighting positive aspects without acknowledging or addressing potential negative interpretations fails to meet the ethical standard of providing a balanced perspective. This can lead to accusations of spin or deception, damaging the company's reputation and potentially violating regulations that prohibit misleading communications. Another incorrect approach that involves downplaying or omitting critical details, even if not outright false, can also be problematic. This selective presentation of information can distort public understanding and create a false impression, which is ethically unsound and may contravene regulations against material omissions. Finally, an approach that relies on emotional appeals or sensationalism to overshadow factual concerns is also ethically flawed. While framing can involve emotional resonance, its misuse to manipulate public opinion or distract from substantive issues is a violation of professional integrity and can lead to regulatory scrutiny. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that begins with a thorough understanding of the situation and its potential implications. This involves identifying all relevant stakeholders and their potential perceptions. Next, they should analyze how different framing strategies might influence these perceptions, always referencing the ethical codes and regulatory requirements of their jurisdiction. The PR manager must then develop communication plans that are not only strategically effective, but also ethically sound and legally compliant, prioritizing transparency, accuracy, and fairness in all messaging. Question 7. Governance review demonstrates that following a significant product recall, the public relations manager's post-crisis evaluation focused on identifying specific, measurable improvements to the crisis communication plan and operational response protocols. Which approach best reflects the impact assessment required for this evaluation? Option A. Analyzing media coverage sentiment and volume to gauge public perception shifts. Option B. Gathering anecdotal feedback from the crisis response team to identify perceived shortcomings in their individual performance. Option C. Documenting all public statements made by the company during the crisis and assessing their immediate effectiveness in mitigating negative press. Option D. Conducting a comprehensive review of internal communication logs and external stakeholder feedback to quantify the impact on trust and operational continuity, and then developing targeted process enhancements. The correct answer is A. Analyzing media coverage sentiment and volume to gauge public perception shifts. Explanation. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires a public relations manager to move beyond simply identifying what went wrong during a crisis to proactively implementing systemic improvements. The challenge lies in translating lessons learned into actionable, sustainable changes that enhance future crisis preparedness and response, while also adhering to the stringent reporting and accountability requirements of the Public Relations Manager Certification Framework. A thorough post-crisis evaluation is not just about damage control, it's about organizational learning and resilience, which are core tenets of professional PR practice. The correct approach involves a comprehensive impact assessment that quantifies the effects of the crisis across various stakeholder groups and business functions, and then uses this data to inform specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time-bound, SMART, process improvements. This aligns with the regulatory expectation for certified PR managers to demonstrate a data-driven and strategic approach to crisis management, ensuring that future responses are more effective and minimize negative repercussions. The focus on measurable outcomes and actionable recommendations directly supports the certification's emphasis on accountability and continuous improvement in PR practice. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on media coverage analysis fails to capture the full spectrum of the crisis's impact. While media sentiment is important, it overlooks crucial elements like stakeholder trust, operational disruptions, and financial implications, which are vital for a holistic understanding and for identifying root causes of process failures. This narrow focus can lead to superficial improvements that do not address underlying systemic issues, potentially leaving the organization vulnerable to similar crises in the future. Another incorrect approach that prioritizes immediate damage control over long-term learning neglects the fundamental purpose of post-crisis evaluation. While immediate actions are necessary during a crisis, the post-crisis phase is dedicated to understanding why the crisis occurred and how to prevent recurrence or mitigate future impacts. Focusing only on immediate damage control in the evaluation phase means missing the opportunity for crucial organizational learning and process enhancement, which is a direct contravention of the certification's mandate for professional development and best practice. A third incorrect approach that involves anecdotal evidence and personal opinions, without a structured framework for data collection and analysis, lacks the rigor expected of a certified PR manager. Professional PR practice, especially in crisis management, demands objective assessment and evidence-based recommendations. Relying on subjective observations can lead to biased conclusions and ineffective strategies, undermining the credibility of the PR function and failing to meet the certification standards for competence and ethical conduct. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a structured post-crisis review framework. This framework should mandate the collection of diverse data points, media, social media, stakeholder feedback, internal operational data, financial impact, followed by a systematic analysis to identify key learnings and areas for improvement. Recommendations should be concrete, actionable, and prioritized based on their potential impact on mitigating future risks and enhancing organizational resilience. This systematic approach ensures that evaluations are thorough, objective, and lead to tangible improvements in crisis preparedness and response capabilities, fulfilling the ethical and regulatory obligations of a certified public relations manager. Question 8. Strategic planning requires a public relations manager to oversee the launch of a new financial product. The campaign involves creating social media posts, press releases, and website content. The team has gathered testimonials from early adopters and is considering using a stock image library for visual assets. What is the most prudent approach to ensure legal compliance regarding defamation, copyright, and privacy? Option A. Proceed with publishing all content immediately after internal team approval, assuming testimonials are truthful and stock images are cleared for general use. Option B. Rely on the marketing team's understanding of copyright law and assume that testimonials being user-generated are inherently protected from defamation claims. Option C. Conduct a thorough legal review of all testimonials for potential defamation, verify copyright permissions for all visual assets, and ensure explicit consent has been obtained for any personal data used in testimonials before any content is released. Option D. Focus solely on the creative execution of the campaign, deferring all legal considerations to a later stage if any issues arise. The correct answer is A. Proceed with publishing all content immediately after internal team approval, assuming testimonials are truthful and stock images are cleared for general use. Explanation. This scenario presents a common challenge for public relations managers, balancing the need for timely and impactful communication with the imperative to avoid legal pitfalls. The core difficulty lies in the potential for statements, even those made with good intention, to be misconstrued or to infringe upon the rights of others, leading to significant legal and reputational damage. The rapid dissemination of information in the digital age amplifies this risk, making careful consideration of defamation, copyright, and privacy laws paramount. The correct approach involves a proactive and diligent review process that prioritizes legal compliance. This means ensuring all external communications, particularly those involving third-party content or potentially sensitive information about individuals, are thoroughly vetted by legal counsel or a designated compliance officer. This approach is correct because it directly addresses the legal considerations of defamation, avoiding false statements that harm reputation, copyright, respecting intellectual property rights, and privacy, protecting individuals' personal information. Adhering to these principles, as mandated by relevant UK regulations and SISI guidelines for financial services PR, is essential for maintaining professional integrity and mitigating legal exposure. An incorrect approach would be to proceed with publishing content without adequate legal review, assuming that the information is factual or that the use of third-party material is permissible. This failure to conduct due diligence exposes the organization to significant risks. For instance, publishing unverified negative statements about a competitor could constitute defamation, leading to lawsuits and financial penalties. Using copyrighted images or text without proper licensing or attribution infringes on intellectual property rights, resulting in legal action and reputational damage. Similarly, disclosing personal information about individuals without their explicit consent violates privacy laws, such as the Data Protection Act 2018, and can lead to severe penalties and loss of public trust. Professionals should adopt a decision-making framework that integrates legal and ethical considerations into every stage of the communication planning process. This involves 1. Identifying potential legal risks associated with proposed communications. 2. Consulting with legal experts to assess these risks and understand applicable regulations. 3. Implementing internal review processes to ensure compliance before dissemination. 4. Prioritizing accuracy, truthfulness, and respect for intellectual property and individual privacy in all messaging. This systematic approach ensures that strategic communication objectives are met without compromising legal standing or ethical obligations. Question 9. Benchmark analysis indicates that a public relations manager is preparing a presentation for potential investors regarding a new product launch. The manager is considering several approaches to convey the product's potential success. Which approach best adheres to professional ethical standards and regulatory expectations for truthful communication? Option A. Emphasize the product's innovative features and potential market disruption, using compelling narratives and aspirational language to paint a picture of significant future returns, while ensuring all factual claims about the product's current capabilities are accurate. Option B. Highlight the product's unique selling propositions and potential benefits, using strong, confident language to convey certainty about its market success and future profitability, without explicitly detailing the inherent risks and uncertainties of a new product launch. Option C. Present a highly optimistic outlook by showcasing only the most favorable market research data and projections, while downplaying or omitting any data that suggests potential challenges or lower than expected market adoption. Option D. Focus heavily on persuasive language and emotional appeals, highlighting the excitement and potential of the new product to capture the audience's imagination and secure investment, with minimal emphasis on detailed factual data. The correct answer is A. Emphasize the product's innovative features and potential market disruption, using compelling narratives and aspirational language to paint a picture of significant future returns, while ensuring all factual claims about the product's current capabilities are accurate. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common challenge for public relations managers, balancing the need for persuasive communication with the imperative of accurate and transparent information dissemination, particularly when addressing a diverse group of stakeholders with potentially conflicting interests. The professional challenge lies in crafting a presentation that is both impactful and ethically sound, avoiding misrepresentation or the creation of unrealistic expectations, which could lead to reputational damage and regulatory scrutiny. Careful judgment is required to ensure that all statements are verifiable and that the presentation aligns with the organization's stated objectives and values, while also respecting the audience's right to truthful information. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves meticulously researching and verifying all data points and claims to be presented, ensuring they are factually accurate and can be substantiated. This approach prioritizes transparency and integrity, which are foundational ethical principles in public relations. By grounding the presentation in verifiable facts and avoiding hyperbole or speculative statements, the public relations manager upholds professional standards and builds trust with stakeholders. This aligns with the regulatory expectation of truthful and non-misleading communication, preventing potential violations related to deceptive practices or false advertising, depending on the specific regulatory framework governing the organization's industry. Incorrect approaches analysis. Focusing solely on persuasive language and emotional appeals without a strong factual basis is an ethically flawed approach. This can lead to misrepresentation and the creation of false impressions, potentially violating regulations that prohibit deceptive advertising or misleading statements. Such tactics erode stakeholder trust and can result in significant reputational damage. Emphasizing potential future benefits or opportunities without clearly stating the speculative nature of these projections is also problematic. This can be interpreted as making unsubstantiated claims or guarantees, which may contravene regulations requiring clear disclosure of risks and uncertainties. It creates an environment where stakeholders might make decisions based on incomplete or overly optimistic information. Presenting information in a way that selectively highlights positive aspects while omitting or downplaying potential challenges or risks is a form of omission that can be misleading. This lack of full disclosure can violate ethical obligations to be comprehensive and transparent, and depending on the jurisdiction and industry, could lead to regulatory action for failing to provide a balanced perspective. Professional reasoning. Public relations managers should adopt a decision-making process that begins with a thorough understanding of the presentation's objectives and the target audience. This should be followed by a rigorous fact-checking process for all proposed content. Ethical considerations, including the principles of honesty, accuracy, and transparency, must guide every aspect of the presentation's development. Professionals should always consider how their communication might be perceived by different stakeholder groups and whether it aligns with legal and regulatory requirements. When in doubt about the accuracy or potential for misinterpretation of any statement, it is prudent to err on the side of caution, seeking clarification, or revising the content to ensure it is unequivocally truthful and balanced. Question 10. Investigation of how a public relations manager should respond to a situation where a company is launching a new eco-friendly product line, but faces community criticism regarding its historical environmental record and current operational impacts, when the primary objective is to generate positive media coverage for the launch. Option A. Focus exclusively on promoting the positive attributes of the new eco-friendly product line in all media communications, while avoiding any mention of the company's historical environmental record or ongoing operational concerns. Option B. Issue a brief statement acknowledging the community's concerns, but proceed with the planned media campaign without further engagement or detailed explanation of corrective measures. Option C. Proactively engage with community leaders and local media to provide comprehensive information about the new product line, including acknowledging past environmental challenges, detailing specific corrective actions being taken, and outlining future sustainability goals. Option D. Minimize public communication about the product launch and focus solely on internal stakeholder communication to manage the situation discreetly. The correct answer is C. Proactively engage with community leaders and local media to provide comprehensive information about the new product line, including acknowledging past environmental challenges, detailing specific corrective actions being taken, and outlining future sustainability goals. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires balancing the immediate need for positive media coverage with the long-term imperative of maintaining stakeholder trust through ethical and transparent communication. The public relations manager must navigate the potential for reputational damage if the company's actions are perceived as misleading or exploitative, even if the immediate goal is to enhance public perception. Careful judgment is required to ensure that the communication strategy aligns with core public relations principles and relevant regulatory expectations, particularly concerning honesty and social responsibility. The correct approach involves proactively engaging with community leaders and local media to provide accurate, context-rich information about the company's environmental initiatives, including acknowledging past challenges and outlining concrete steps for improvement. This demonstrates transparency by admitting imperfections and showing a commitment to rectifying them. It fosters social responsibility by prioritizing open dialogue and community well-being over mere image management. This approach aligns with the core principles of public relations, emphasizing truthfulness, accuracy, and a commitment to public interest, which are implicitly or explicitly supported by professional codes of conduct and general ethical guidelines that underpin regulatory frameworks for corporate communication. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on highlighting the positive aspects of the environmental initiatives without acknowledging past issues or providing detailed plans for future improvements would be ethically flawed. This would be considered a failure in transparency, as it omits crucial context that stakeholders need to form a balanced opinion. Such an approach risks being perceived as manipulative or disingenuous, potentially leading to a loss of credibility and trust, which is detrimental to long-term stakeholder relationships and could attract regulatory scrutiny if deemed misleading. Another incorrect approach that involves downplaying or ignoring community concerns and proceeding with the communication strategy without addressing them directly would be a significant ethical failure. This demonstrates a lack of social responsibility by prioritizing corporate interests over community well-being and engagement. It violates the principle of open communication and can lead to heightened conflict and reputational damage, as stakeholders may feel unheard and disrespected. A third incorrect approach that involves selectively releasing information to the media that paints the company in an overly favorable light, while withholding information about potential negative impacts or ongoing challenges, constitutes a breach of ethical communication standards. This lack of full disclosure is a failure in transparency and honesty, undermining the credibility of the public relations efforts and potentially leading to accusations of deception. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a thorough assessment of all stakeholder perspectives, a commitment to factual accuracy, and a proactive approach to communication. Professionals should prioritize building and maintaining trust through open, honest, and socially responsible engagement. This involves understanding the potential impact of communication on various stakeholders, adhering to ethical codes of conduct, and ensuring that all public relations activities are conducted with integrity and a genuine commitment to the public interest. Question 11. Quality control measures reveal that a significant data breach has occurred, potentially exposing sensitive customer information. The internal investigation is ongoing, but initial findings suggest a sophisticated external attack. The company's stock price has already seen a slight dip, and media inquiries are beginning to flood the communications department. Which of the following approaches represents the most responsible and ethically sound initial response for the public relations manager? Option A. Issue a strong denial of any breach, attributing any negative reports to misinformation or competitor sabotage, and focus all communication efforts on damage control and positive brand messaging. Option B. Remain silent and instruct all employees not to speak to the media or public until the investigation is fully complete, allowing the company to control all information flow. Option C. Issue a detailed statement outlining all preliminary findings of the investigation, including potential vulnerabilities and the estimated number of affected individuals, to demonstrate transparency. Option D. Immediately issue a brief statement acknowledging the possibility of a breach, stating that an investigation is underway, and promising to provide further details as they become available, while also initiating proactive outreach to affected customers and relevant regulatory bodies. The correct answer is D. Immediately issue a brief statement acknowledging the possibility of a breach, stating that an investigation is underway, and promising to provide further details as they become available, while also initiating proactive outreach to affected customers and relevant regulatory bodies. Explanation: this scenario is professionally challenging because it involves a high-stakes crisis with potential for significant reputational damage and regulatory scrutiny. The speed at which information spreads and the intensity of public and media scrutiny demand a swift, accurate, and ethically sound response. Missteps can lead to loss of public trust, legal repercussions, and long-term damage to the organization's brand. Careful judgment is required to balance transparency with the need to protect sensitive information and avoid premature conclusions. The correct approach involves a multifaceted strategy that prioritizes factual accuracy, empathy, and proactive communication. This approach is right because it aligns with core public relations ethics and regulatory expectations for transparency and accountability. Specifically, it involves 1. Establishing a dedicated crisis communication team with clear roles and responsibilities. 2. Gathering verified facts from reliable internal sources before issuing any statements. 3. Developing clear, concise, and empathetic messaging that acknowledges the situation and expresses concern for those affected. 4. Designating a single, trained spokesperson to ensure consistent messaging. 5. Proactively engaging with key stakeholders, including affected parties, regulators, and the media, providing updates as new information becomes available. 6. Monitoring media coverage and social media sentiment to gauge public perception and address misinformation. This approach is ethically sound, as it upholds principles of honesty, integrity, and responsibility. It also aligns with regulatory frameworks that often require timely and accurate disclosure of material information, particularly when public safety or significant stakeholder interests are involved. For instance, in the U.S., regulations like those from the Securities and Exchange Commission, SEC, mandate prompt disclosure of material non-public information that could affect investment decisions, and the Federal Trade Commission, FTC, oversees consumer protection, requiring truthful advertising and prompt notification of data breaches. Ethical codes of professional bodies like the Public Relations Society of America, PRSA, emphasize truthfulness, accuracy, and public interest. An incorrect approach that involves immediately issuing a defensive statement without verifying facts is ethically and regulatorily flawed. This demonstrates a lack of integrity and can lead to the dissemination of misinformation, which is a direct violation of ethical principles and can have legal consequences if it misleads stakeholders or regulators. It also fails to show empathy, which is crucial in crisis situations. Another incorrect approach, which is to remain silent and wait for the media to dictate the narrative, is professionally unacceptable. This inaction can be interpreted as an admission of guilt or a lack of concern, further eroding trust. It also relinquishes control of the narrative, allowing speculation and potentially damaging rumors to spread unchecked, which is detrimental to reputation management and can violate regulatory expectations for proactive communication in certain crisis scenarios. A third incorrect approach, which is to solely rely on social media for communication without a coordinated strategy or verified information, is also problematic. While social media is a vital channel, using it as the sole or primary communication tool without a clear, fact-based message can lead to fragmented and inconsistent information, increasing the risk of misinformation and failing to meet the communication needs of all stakeholders, including regulators and traditional media. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a structured crisis communication plan that is activated immediately. This plan should outline steps for information gathering, message development, stakeholder identification, communication channel selection, and ongoing monitoring. Professionals should adhere to a framework that prioritizes ethical considerations, regulatory compliance, and the organization's long-term reputation. This involves a continuous cycle of assessment, action, and evaluation, ensuring that responses are timely, accurate, and aligned with organizational values and legal obligations. Question 12. The efficiency study reveals that the social media team is struggling to achieve viral reach for financial product announcements. To boost engagement and shareability, the team proposes a new content strategy that emphasizes short, attention-grabbing videos with minimal text and no explicit risk disclaimers, relying on a link to a separate web page for detailed information. This strategy aims to maximize initial clicks and shares, with the assumption that interested users will seek out the full details, which approach best aligns with the regulatory framework and ethical obligations for a public relations manager in the UK financial services sector. Option A. Focus on creating visually appealing content that sparks curiosity, with the intention of driving traffic to the company website where all regulatory information is housed, accepting that some initial engagement may be with users who do not fully absorb the risks. Option B. Prioritize creating highly entertaining and trend-driven content that is likely to go viral, with the understanding that the firm's compliance department will review it post-publication to address any potential issues. Option C. Develop content that is inherently engaging and shareable while ensuring all necessary risk warnings and disclosures are clearly and prominently integrated within the social media post itself, or immediately accessible through a clearly signposted and easily navigable link, and subject to a thorough compliance review. Option D. Leverage user-generated content from influencers who are known for their engaging style, with minimal oversight from the PR team, assuming their audience is accustomed to seeking out information independently. The correct answer is C. Develop content that is inherently engaging and shareable while ensuring all necessary risk warnings and disclosures are clearly and prominently integrated within the social media post itself, or immediately accessible through a clearly signposted and easily navigable link, and subject to a thorough compliance review. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires a public relations manager to balance the need for engaging social media content with strict adherence to regulatory guidelines concerning financial promotions. The pressure to create viral content can lead to overlooking crucial compliance requirements, potentially resulting in significant reputational damage and regulatory penalties. Careful judgment is required to ensure that all content, regardless of its intended engagement level, meets the necessary legal and ethical standards. The correct approach involves prioritizing regulatory compliance above all else when creating social media content for a financial services firm. This means that any content, even if designed to be highly shareable, must undergo a rigorous review process to ensure it does not make misleading claims, omit essential risk warnings, or otherwise violate the specific regulations governing financial promotions. This approach is right because it upholds the fundamental ethical duty of a PR manager to protect both the public and the firm from regulatory breaches and reputational harm. Specifically in the UK, the Financial Conduct Authority (FCA) Handbook particularly the Conduct of Business Sourcebook, COBS, and the Financial Promotion Rules, mandates that all financial promotions must be fair, clear, and not misleading. The Advertising Standards Authority, ASA, also plays a role in ensuring advertisements, including social media content, are not misleading or socially irresponsible. Therefore, a content creation strategy that embeds compliance checks from the outset is essential. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on maximizing engagement metrics without adequate regulatory oversight is professionally unacceptable. This failure stems from a disregard for the FCA's stringent requirements for financial promotions, which are designed to protect consumers. Such an approach risks creating content that is misleading or omits necessary risk disclosures, directly contravening COBS 4.2, 1R and other relevant FCA rules. Furthermore, it violates the ethical principle of transparency and honesty in communications, which is paramount in financial services. Another incorrect approach that prioritizes speed and spontaneity over thoroughness in content creation would also be professionally unacceptable. While social media thrives on timeliness, in the regulated financial sector, speed cannot come at the expense of accuracy and compliance. This approach fails to account for the detailed scrutiny required by the FCA and ASA, potentially leading to the dissemination of non-compliant material. The ethical failure lies in prioritizing operational efficiency over the legal and ethical obligation to provide accurate and responsible financial information. A third incorrect approach that relies on user-generated content without robust moderation and verification processes is also professionally unsound. While user-generated content can be highly engaging in a regulated environment, the firm remains responsible for the content it allows to be published under its brand. Failing to vet such content for compliance with financial promotion rules would be a direct violation of regulatory obligations and an ethical lapse in due diligence. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a compliance-first mindset. Before any content is drafted or published, the PR manager must understand the specific regulatory landscape applicable to the firm's communications. This involves consulting with legal and compliance departments, understanding the firm's risk appetite, and establishing clear internal approval workflows. When developing social media strategies, the focus should be on creating content that is both engaging and compliant, rather than attempting to make compliant content engaging as an afterthought. A framework that integrates regulatory checks into every stage of the content creation lifecycle, from ideation to publication and monitoring, is crucial for responsible PR management in regulated industries. Question 13. When evaluating potential influencer marketing collaborations for a new product launch, what process best optimizes for both campaign effectiveness and strict adherence to regulatory disclosure requirements? Option A. Conducting thorough due diligence on potential influencers, verifying their audience demographics, assessing their genuine interest in the product, and confirming their understanding and commitment to clear, conspicuous disclosure of any material connections. Option B. Relying on informal agreements and verbal assurances from influencers that they will disclose their partnerships, trusting their professional judgment. Option C. Prioritizing influencers with the largest follower counts and highest engagement rates, assuming their audience will be receptive to the brand's message. Option D. Selecting influencers who offer to promote the product as organic or unpaid content, without further investigation into any potential benefits they might receive. The correct answer is C. Prioritizing influencers with the largest follower counts and highest engagement rates, assuming their audience will be receptive to the brand's message. Explanation. This scenario is professionally challenging because the public relations manager must navigate the evolving landscape of influencer marketing while adhering to strict regulatory frameworks designed to protect consumers from deceptive advertising. Core challenge lies in ensuring transparency and authenticity in influencer collaborations, which directly impacts the brand's reputation and legal standing. Careful judgment is required to balance the desire for effective marketing with the imperative of compliance. The correct approach involves a multifaceted due diligence process that prioritizes influencer alignment with brand values, audience relevance, and a demonstrated understanding of disclosure requirements. This approach is right because it proactively mitigates risks associated with noncompliance. Specifically, under the regulatory framework for this exam, assuming a U.S. jurisdiction for illustrative purposes, referencing the Federal Trade Commission (FTC) guidelines. Influencers must clearly and conspicuously disclose their material connections with brands. This includes any form of compensation, free products, or other benefits. A thorough vetting process that confirms an influencer's willingness and ability to make these disclosures, alongside their genuine affinity for the product or service, ensures that the marketing campaign is both effective and legally sound, fostering consumer trust. An approach that focuses solely on follower count and engagement metrics is incorrect because it overlooks the critical regulatory requirement for transparency. High follower numbers do not guarantee compliance with disclosure laws, and an influencer with a large but disengaged or misinformed audience, or one unwilling to disclose their partnership, can lead to significant legal repercussions for the brand, including fines and reputational damage. An approach that relies on informal agreements or verbal assurances regarding disclosures is also incorrect. Regulatory bodies like the FTC require clear, unambiguous disclosures. Informal agreements are insufficient to ensure this, leaving the brand vulnerable to accusations of deceptive practices if disclosures are not made or are inadequate. This demonstrates a failure to implement robust compliance mechanisms. Furthermore, an approach that prioritizes influencers who promise organic or unpaid promotion without verifying the absence of any material connection is ethically and regulatorily flawed. Even if no direct payment is involved, if an influencer receives free products or services in exchange for a review or promotion, this constitutes a material connection that must be disclosed. Failing to verify this can lead to misleading consumers into believing the endorsement is entirely unbiased. A professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve establishing a clear influencer marketing policy that outlines compliance requirements, disclosure standards, and vetting procedures. This policy should be informed by current regulatory guidance. Before engaging any influencer, a comprehensive review should be conducted, including assessing their past content for disclosure practices, discussing disclosure expectations explicitly, and obtaining written agreements that stipulate compliance with all relevant advertising laws and ethical guidelines. Continuous monitoring of influencer content throughout the campaign is also crucial to ensure ongoing adherence. Question 14. The audit findings indicate that the recent public relations campaign for Innovate Solutions, Inc. experienced a significant disconnect between its intended message and public perception, suggesting a potential misallocation of media outreach efforts. As the public relations manager, you are tasked with developing a revised strategy for identifying and targeting media outlets for the upcoming product launch. The company operates under the regulatory framework of the United States, with a strong emphasis on the Federal Trade Commission, FTC guidelines for advertising and public disclosures, and the Public Relations Society of America, PRSA, Code of Ethics. Which of the following approaches best aligns with these regulatory and ethical requirements for identifying and targeting media outlets? Option A. Conduct a comprehensive analysis of print publications, broadcast channels, and online news sites, evaluating each for audience demographics, editorial focus, journalistic integrity, and adherence to FTC disclosure requirements for sponsored content. Option B. Focus exclusively on niche industry blogs and forums that are known for their enthusiastic user communities, assuming their passion will translate into positive coverage. Option C. Engage a third-party media buying agency that specializes in securing placements at the lowest possible cost, irrespective of the outlet's editorial content or audience. Option D. Prioritize online news aggregators and social media influencers with the largest follower counts, as this guarantees maximum reach and engagement for the new product. The correct answer is D. Prioritize online news aggregators and social media influencers with the largest follower counts, as this guarantees maximum reach and engagement for the new product. Explanation: this scenario is professionally challenging because it requires a public relations manager to balance strategic communication goals with the ethical and regulatory obligations of accurate and responsible media engagement. The core challenge lies in identifying media outlets that not only reach the target audience, but also align with the organization's values and adhere to journalistic integrity, thereby avoiding misrepresentation or the dissemination of misleading information. Careful judgment is required to ensure that media targeting is both effective and compliant. The correct approach involves a thorough, data-driven analysis of media outlets, considering their reach, audience demographics, editorial focus, and reputation for accuracy. This aligns with the ethical principles of transparency and truthfulness in public relations, as well as any relevant professional codes of conduct that emphasize responsible communication and avoiding deceptive practices. Specifically, it necessitates understanding the regulatory environment governing media content and advertising within the specified jurisdiction, ensuring that any outreach or placement is compliant with these regulations. For instance, if the jurisdiction has specific guidelines on sponsored content or disclosure, these must be meticulously followed. An incorrect approach that prioritizes only reach without considering editorial alignment or accuracy risks, associating the organization with outlets that may have a history of sensationalism, bias, or factual inaccuracies. This can damage the organization's reputation and potentially violate regulations concerning truthful advertising or public statements. Another incorrect approach, focusing solely on cost-effectiveness without due diligence on the outlet's credibility, can lead to placement in outlets that lack the trust of the target audience or, worse, engage in unethical journalistic practices, thereby exposing the organization to reputational and regulatory risks. Furthermore, neglecting to verify the online presence and digital footprint of an outlet can result in engagement with platforms that are not legitimate news sources or that have questionable data privacy practices, which could have regulatory implications. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that begins with clearly defining campaign objectives and target audiences. This should be followed by comprehensive research into potential media outlets across print, broadcast, and online platforms. This research must include an assessment of audience overlap, editorial standards, journalistic integrity, and any relevant regulatory compliance. A tiered approach to media selection, prioritizing outlets that demonstrate a commitment to accuracy and ethical reporting, is crucial. Finally, ongoing monitoring of media coverage and outlet performance is essential to ensure continued alignment and compliance. Question 15. Analysis of a public relations manager's approach to measuring the success of a new product launch campaign, where the primary objective is to increase positive media coverage and drive consumer interest. What is the most effective and ethically sound method for setting evaluation metrics? Option A. Establishing metrics that track the number of positive media placements and the sentiment analysis of those placements, alongside website traffic spikes directly attributable to campaign activities. Option B. Focusing on the total number of press releases distributed and the reach of social media posts, regardless of engagement or sentiment. Option C. Measuring the increase in general website traffic and social media followers without a clear link to the specific campaign's objectives or content. Option D. Relying on informal feedback from industry contacts and anecdotal evidence of consumer buzz. The correct answer is A. Establishing metrics that track the number of positive media placements and the sentiment analysis of those placements, alongside website traffic spikes directly attributable to campaign activities. Explanation. This scenario presents a common challenge for public relations managers, demonstrating the tangible impact of their efforts in a way that aligns with organizational objectives and regulatory expectations. The difficulty lies in moving beyond anecdotal evidence or vanity metrics to establish a clear link between PR activities and measurable business outcomes. Professionals must exercise careful judgment to select metrics that are both relevant to the campaign's goals and defensible to stakeholders, while also adhering to ethical communication standards and any applicable industry regulations regarding reporting and transparency. The correct approach involves setting evaluation metrics that are directly tied to the specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time-bound, SMART, objectives of the PR campaign. This means identifying key performance indicators, KPI, that reflect the desired outcomes, whether they are increased brand awareness, improved public perception, enhanced stakeholder engagement, or a shift in public opinion. For instance, if a campaign aims to increase positive media mentions, the metric would be the number and sentiment of those mentions, correlated with the campaign's timeline. This approach is ethically sound and professionally responsible because it provides a clear, objective basis for evaluating success, allowing for data-driven adjustments and demonstrating accountability to the organization. It aligns with principles of transparency and evidence-based practice, ensuring that PR efforts are not just perceived as valuable, but are demonstrably contributing to organizational goals. An incorrect approach would be to focus solely on output metrics, such as the sheer volume of press releases issued or the number of social media posts published. While these indicate activity, they do not measure effectiveness or impact. This fails to demonstrate value to the organization and can lead to misallocation of resources. Ethically, it can be misleading if presented as a measure of success without further context. Another incorrect approach is to rely exclusively on subjective feedback or anecdotal evidence, such as feeling like the campaign went well or citing a few positive comments. This lacks objectivity and is not quantifiable, making it impossible to reliably assess campaign performance or make informed strategic decisions. It also fails to meet the expectation of data-driven reporting, often required by regulatory bodies or internal governance. A third incorrect approach is to select metrics that are easily achievable but do not align with the campaign's strategic goals, such as measuring website traffic increases that are not attributable to the PR campaign or are not relevant to the campaign's specific objectives. This creates a false sense of accomplishment and does not provide genuine insight into the PR team's effectiveness. It can lead to a misrepresentation of results and a failure to identify areas for improvement, potentially violating ethical standards of honesty and accuracy in reporting. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that begins with clearly defining campaign objectives. These objectives should then be translated into specific, measurable KPIs. The selection of these KPIs should be a collaborative process involving key stakeholders to ensure alignment. Regular monitoring and analysis of these metrics are crucial, allowing for agile adjustments to the campaign strategy. Finally, reporting should focus on the impact of PR activities on these KPIs, providing a clear and honest assessment of campaign effectiveness. Question 16. The risk matrix shows a high probability of negative market reaction and regulatory scrutiny following the announcement of an ongoing SEC investigation into potential accounting irregularities at your publicly traded company. As the public relations manager, you need to communicate this development to stakeholders. Which of the following approaches best adheres to the regulatory framework and ethical best practices for a public relations manager certification in the U.S.? Option A. Publish an op-ed in a financial newspaper written by the CEO, expressing personal confidence in the company's integrity and offering a detailed, albeit preliminary, defense against the allegations. Option B. Distribute a media alert to key journalists that hints at the investigation's potential scope and reassures them that the company has strong internal controls, implying a swift resolution. Option C. Issue a factual press release confirming the existence of the SEC investigation and stating that the company is cooperating fully, without speculating on the outcome or providing details of the investigation. Option D. Issue a brief holding statement on the company's investor relations website acknowledging awareness of market rumors, but declining to comment on any specific inquiries or investigations. The correct answer is C. Issue a factual press release confirming the existence of the SEC investigation and stating that the company is cooperating fully, without speculating on the outcome or providing details of the investigation. Explanation. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires a public relations manager to navigate the delicate balance between proactive crisis communication and the potential for premature or misleading information dissemination, which can have significant legal and reputational repercussions. The need to inform stakeholders quickly must be weighed against the absolute priority of adhering to the regulatory framework for financial disclosures and public statements. The exam's jurisdiction is assumed to be the United States, governed by the Securities and Exchange Commission, SEC, regulations, specifically Regulation FD, fair disclosure. The correct approach involves issuing a factual press release that acknowledges the investigation without speculating on outcomes or providing non-public information. This aligns with SEC Regulation FD, which mandates that when a company discloses material non-public information to securities market professionals, it must also disclose that information to the public. A press release is a widely accessible format that ensures broad dissemination. This approach prioritizes transparency while strictly adhering to regulatory requirements by only stating confirmed facts and the existence of the investigation, avoiding any forward-looking statements or opinions that could be construed as material non-public information or market manipulation. An incorrect approach would be to issue a media alert that includes speculative language about the investigation's potential impact, or to draft an op-ed that offers a personal opinion on the company's innocence. Media alert that speculates on outcomes could be interpreted as disclosing material non-public information or attempting to influence market perception without proper disclosure, violating Regulation FD. An op-ed, while a valid PR tool, is inappropriate in this context as it is a platform for opinion and analysis, not for official corporate statements regarding an ongoing regulatory investigation. Such a piece would likely contain subjective statements and potentially non-public insights, risking both regulatory penalties and reputational damage by appearing to circumvent official disclosure channels. Another incorrect approach would be to remain silent, as prolonged silence in the face of a public investigation can lead to market speculation and damage investor confidence, potentially creating a different kind of regulatory risk if it's perceived as an attempt to conceal information. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that prioritizes regulatory compliance above all else. This involves consulting legal counsel to ensure all public statements are reviewed for compliance with SEC regulations, particularly Regulation FD. The framework should also include a clear internal process for vetting all external communications, especially those related to sensitive matters like investigations. When in doubt, err on the side of caution and delay public statements until absolute clarity and regulatory approval are obtained. The focus should always be on factual, verifiable information disseminated through appropriate, publicly accessible channels. Question 17. System analysis indicates that a public relations manager is tasked with responding to a public outcry following an environmental incident caused by their company. The public is expressing strong negative sentiment, fueled by media reports highlighting the severity of the damage. The manager is considering several communication strategies to mitigate reputational harm and rebuild trust. Which strategy best aligns with established persuasion theories and ethical public relations practice in this context? Option A. Implement a strategy that highlights the financial costs of the remediation efforts and the potential job losses if the company faces severe penalties, aiming to evoke sympathy and shift the focus away from the environmental impact. Option B. Focus on the peripheral route of persuasion by using emotionally charged testimonials from satisfied customers and prominent, well-respected figures who have no direct knowledge of the incident, aiming to create a positive halo effect. Option C. Emphasize the technical complexities of the incident and the rarity of such occurrences, creating a sense of confusion and doubt about the severity of the damage, without directly addressing the public's emotional response or offering concrete solutions. Option D. Employ a strategy that acknowledges the public's concerns, provides clear and factual information about the incident and the company's immediate remediation efforts, and outlines a long-term commitment to environmental stewardship, thereby addressing potential cognitive dissonance by offering a consistent and credible narrative. The correct answer is B. Focus on the peripheral route of persuasion by using emotionally charged testimonials from satisfied customers and prominent, well-respected figures who have no direct knowledge of the incident, aiming to create a positive halo effect. Explanation. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires a public relations manager to navigate the ethical and regulatory landscape of persuasive communication while managing potential reputational damage. The core challenge lies in balancing the organization's need to influence public perception with the imperative to be truthful and transparent, as mandated by professional codes of conduct and potentially specific industry regulations. Though for this exam, we focus on general ethical principles and the specified persuasion theories. The manager must consider how different communication strategies will be processed by the target audience and the potential for unintended consequences. The correct approach involves leveraging the elaboration likelihood model, ELM, to tailor communication strategies based on the audience's motivation and ability to process information, and applying cognitive dissonance theory to understand how individuals resolve conflicting beliefs or behaviors. Specifically, when addressing a crisis where the organization's actions are being questioned, a manager should aim to reduce dissonance by providing clear, consistent, and credible information that aligns with the audience's existing positive perceptions of the organization, or by acknowledging shortcomings and outlining corrective actions. This approach respects the audience's cognitive processes and avoids manipulative tactics, aligning with ethical PR practice, which prioritizes honesty and accuracy. An incorrect approach would be to solely rely on superficial cues or emotional appeals without addressing the underlying cognitive processes, as suggested by the peripheral route of the ELM. This might involve using celebrity endorsements or emotionally charged language to distract from factual inaccuracies or a lack of substantive response. This fails ethically by potentially misleading the audience and not providing them with the information needed for informed judgment. It also risks exacerbating cognitive dissonance if the superficial message is perceived as incongruent with reality, leading to increased distrust. Another incorrect approach would be to ignore the potential for cognitive dissonance altogether and present information that directly contradicts deeply held beliefs or values of the audience without offering a pathway for resolution. This could involve a defensive stance that dismisses valid concerns or presents information in a way that creates significant internal conflict for the audience, making them resistant to the message and potentially leading to backlash. This approach is ethically problematic as it fails to engage with the audience's perspective and can be perceived as arrogant or dismissive. A third incorrect approach would be to attempt to create dissonance without a clear strategy for resolution, hoping to force a change in attitude through discomfort. While cognitive dissonance theory suggests that discomfort can motivate change, a PR manager's role is to facilitate understanding and build trust, not to intentionally induce distress. This approach is ethically questionable as it borders on manipulation and can damage long-term relationships with stakeholders. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a thorough analysis of the target audience's existing attitudes, beliefs, and their capacity for processing information, ELM. It should also involve anticipating potential cognitive dissonance and developing communication strategies that either reinforce existing positive perceptions, provide credible explanations for negative events, or offer clear pathways for resolving conflicting information. Transparency, accuracy, and empathy are paramount, ensuring that communication is designed to inform and build trust, rather than to manipulate or deceive. Question 18. Research into the core principles and scope of practice for a public relations manager, as defined by the Public Relations Manager Certification's regulatory framework, leads to a critical need to differentiate it from other communication disciplines. Which of the following best encapsulates the defining characteristics of public relations within this framework? Option A. Public relations is exclusively focused on managing an organization's response during times of crisis and negative publicity. Option B. Public relations primarily involves securing positive media coverage and disseminating press releases to inform the public about an organization's activities. Option C. Public relations is a strategic management function that builds mutually beneficial relationships between an organization and its publics through two-way communication, encompassing research, planning, implementation, and evaluation. Option D. Public relations is essentially a form of paid advertising and promotional messaging designed to influence consumer purchasing decisions. The correct answer is C. Public relations is a strategic management function that builds mutually beneficial relationships between an organization and its publics through two-way communication, encompassing research, planning, implementation, and evaluation. Explanation. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires a public relations manager to accurately define their role and its scope within the established regulatory framework, distinguishing it from other communication functions. Misinterpreting these boundaries can lead to non-compliance, reputational damage, and ineffective communication strategies. Careful judgment is required to ensure all activities align with the principles of transparency, accuracy, and ethical conduct as mandated by the relevant regulatory bodies for the Public Relations Manager Certification exam. The correct approach accurately defines public relations as a strategic management function focused on building mutually beneficial relationships between an organization and its publics through two-way communication. This aligns with the core tenets of public relations as recognized by professional bodies and regulatory guidelines, emphasizing research, planning, implementation, and evaluation. It correctly distinguishes PR from purely promotional or sales-driven activities, highlighting its broader organizational and societal impact. This approach is ethically sound and compliant with the spirit of professional certification, which aims to uphold high standards of practice. An approach that defines public relations solely as media relations or publicity fails to capture the strategic and relational aspects of the profession. This is a common misconception, but is ethically and regulatorily insufficient, as it limits PR to a tactical function rather than a management one. It overlooks the crucial element of two-way communication and relationship building, which are fundamental to ethical and effective PR. An approach that equates public relations with advertising or marketing conflates distinct disciplines. While there are overlaps and collaborative opportunities, advertising is typically paid for and controlled communication, whereas public relations often involves earned media and focuses on building credibility and trust through third-party endorsement and dialogue. This distinction is vital for maintaining the integrity of PR and avoiding misrepresentation to the public and stakeholders. An approach that views public relations as simply crisis management, while a critical component, is too narrow. Crisis management is a reactive function within the broader strategic scope of public relations, which also encompasses proactive reputation management, stakeholder engagement, and ongoing communication efforts. Defining PR solely by its crisis response function ignores its vital role in building and maintaining positive organizational relationships. The professional decision-making process for similar situations involves a thorough understanding of the public relations manager certifications, regulatory framework, and ethical codes. Professionals should always seek to define their role and activities within these established parameters. When faced with ambiguity, it is advisable to consult official guidelines, professional association standards, and, if necessary, seek clarification from regulatory bodies. The focus should always be on strategic, ethical, and transparent communication that serves the organization's long-term interests and its public's. Question 19. Market research demonstrates that a significant portion of your company's investor base is concerned about recent market volatility impacting the sector. As the public relations manager, you need to craft a communication to address these concerns. Which of the following approaches best aligns with regulatory requirements and ethical communication practices for a publicly traded company? Option A. Issue a series of social media posts using optimistic language and industry buzzwords to reassure investors, without providing specific data or referencing official disclosures. Option B. Prepare a press release that focuses exclusively on the company's historical successes and strong financial performance, downplaying the current market volatility as a temporary and insignificant factor. Option C. Develop a statement that highlights the company's long-term strategic vision and resilience, emphasizing positive performance indicators, while acknowledging that market conditions are dynamic and subject to change, and directing stakeholders to the company's official filings for detailed financial information. Option D. Draft an internal memo for employees that outlines the company's challenges due to market volatility, but refrain from public communication to avoid alarming investors. Correct answer is C. Develop a statement that highlights the company's long-term strategic vision and resilience, emphasizing positive performance indicators, while acknowledging that market conditions are dynamic and subject to change, and directing stakeholders to the company's official filings for detailed financial information. Explanation. This scenario is professionally challenging because a public relations manager must balance the need to communicate effectively with diverse stakeholders with strict adherence to regulatory disclosure requirements. Misrepresenting information, even with good intentions, can lead to significant legal and reputational damage. The challenge lies in crafting messages that are both persuasive and compliant, ensuring transparency without causing undue alarm, or providing selective information that could be deemed misleading. The correct approach involves developing a clear, concise, and factually accurate communication strategy that addresses the core concerns of each stakeholder group, while explicitly referencing the relevant regulatory disclosures. This ensures that all parties receive consistent and truthful information, aligning with the principles of transparency and accountability mandated by regulatory frameworks. Specifically, in the context of financial services, this approach upholds the spirit and letter of regulations that require fair dealing and accurate representation of material information to investors and the public. An approach that focuses solely on positive framing, without acknowledging potential risks or uncertainties, fails to meet regulatory obligations for full and fair disclosure. This can be interpreted as misleading or omitting material facts, which is a direct violation of regulations designed to protect investors and maintain market integrity. Similarly, an approach that prioritizes speed over accuracy risks disseminating unverified or incomplete information, leading to potential market manipulation concerns or reputational damage if subsequent corrections are required. Lastly, an approach that uses overly technical jargon or complex language without clear explanations can inadvertently exclude or confuse stakeholders, hindering effective communication and potentially violating principles of accessibility and clarity required by regulatory bodies. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that begins with a thorough understanding of the regulatory landscape and the specific disclosure obligations applicable to the situation. This involves identifying all relevant stakeholder groups and their information needs, then developing communication materials that are factually accurate, balanced, and compliant with all legal and ethical standards. Regular review and validation of communications by legal and compliance teams are crucial steps in this process. Question 20. Comparative studies suggest that in developing a crisis management plan, the most effective initial step for a public relations manager when faced with an unforeseen event is to: Option A. Immediately issue a broad public statement to control the initial media narrative. Option B. Conduct a rapid, multi-stakeholder impact assessment to inform communication priorities and resource allocation. Option C. Focus exclusively on briefing internal teams and leadership before any external communication. Option D. Prepare a standardized crisis communication template applicable to any situation. The correct answer is B. Conduct a rapid, multi-stakeholder impact assessment to inform communication priorities and resource allocation. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario is professionally challenging because a public relations manager must balance the immediate need to control a narrative during a crisis with the long-term imperative of maintaining stakeholder trust and adhering to regulatory disclosure requirements. The speed of information dissemination in a crisis, coupled with potential reputational damage, creates immense pressure to act decisively. However, acting without a thorough impact assessment can lead to misallocation of resources, ineffective communication, and potentially regulatory breaches. Careful judgment is required to prioritize actions that are both responsive and compliant. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves conducting a rapid but comprehensive impact assessment. This means systematically evaluating the potential and actual effects of the crisis on various stakeholders: customers, employees, investors, regulators, the public, the organization's operations, and its reputation. This assessment informs the development of targeted communication strategies, resource allocation, and the identification of key messages. From a regulatory and ethical standpoint, this approach aligns with the principles of transparency and accountability. For instance, in the U.S., regulations like those from the Securities and Exchange Commission, SEC, often require timely and accurate disclosure of material information that could affect investors. A thorough impact assessment helps identify what constitutes material information and guides the development of communication that is both truthful and compliant with disclosure obligations. Ethically, it ensures that communication is relevant and addresses the concerns of those most affected, fostering trust. Incorrect approaches analysis. Focusing solely on immediate media appeasement without a broader impact assessment is an incorrect approach. This can lead to reactive, potentially inaccurate, or incomplete statements that fail to address the root causes or the full scope of the crisis. It risks alienating other key stakeholders and may not satisfy regulatory disclosure requirements if material information is omitted. Prioritizing internal communication exclusively, while important, is also an incomplete approach if it neglects external stakeholders and regulatory bodies. A crisis often has significant external ramifications, and failing to communicate with customers, investors, or the public can exacerbate reputational damage and lead to regulatory scrutiny for lack of timely disclosure. Developing a generic, one-size-fits-all communication template without tailoring it to the specific crisis and its impact is another incorrect approach. This demonstrates a lack of understanding of the crisis's nuances and the diverse needs of different stakeholders. It can result in irrelevant or insensitive messaging, undermining credibility, and potentially failing to meet specific regulatory communication mandates that require tailored disclosures. Professional reasoning. Professionals should adopt a structured decision-making process that begins with understanding the regulatory landscape relevant to the crisis. This is followed by a rapid impact assessment to identify all affected parties and potential consequences. Based on this assessment, communication objectives are defined, and strategies are developed that prioritize accuracy, transparency, and compliance. Key considerations include identifying material information for disclosure, tailoring messages to specific stakeholder groups, and establishing clear channels for ongoing communication and feedback. This systematic approach ensures that crisis communication is effective, ethical, and legally sound.